People whose lives were upended by Hurricane Sandy joined other voters on Tuesday to cast ballots after elected officials in New York and New Jersey scrambled to relocate scores of polling places that had become unusable because of power failures, flooding or evacuations. Though the region hit by Hurricane Sandy is not expected to be in play in the presidential election, the combination of the storm and heavy morning turnout yielded long lines, confusion, frustration and anger. At several polling sites in New York City, the vote scanning machines being used for the first time in a presidential election malfunctioned, forcing workers to resort to paper ballots and slowing the process even more. Randy Harder, 66, an artist and designer, voted in New Rochelle, in Westchester County, where his frustration at what he described as an incompetent government response to the storm had transformed into frustration with his voting experience. When Mr. Harder asked an election worker for help to fill out a paper ballot he had never seen before, he was told, "Just fill it out." When his ballot was inserted, the machine jammed. A second machine also jammed. He eventually was given an envelope in which to place a ballot that would be hand-counted. The entire voting experience took 45 minutes, Mr. Harder said. On the Upper West Side of Manhattan, hundreds of voters waited on the sidewalk and packed into a gym at Public School 163. Voters had to wait in different lines to determine their election district, to get a ballot, to fill out the ballot and to get the ballot scanned. The process took an hour. There was no help for the disabled, and people grew increasingly upset. Officials tried to make the process work smoothly, especially for those living in areas hard hit by the hurricane. New Jersey and New York both said they would allow voters uprooted by Hurricane Sandy to cast provisional ballots anywhere in their states. Just because you're displaced doesn't mean you should be disenfranchised, Gov. Andrew M. Cuomo of New York said in announcing the step on Monday. But the provisional ballots would, in many cases, allow residents to vote only in statewide contests and in the presidential election, in which President Obama is heavily favored in both states. The ballots could not be used in local and congressional races, which in some areas are far more competitive. New Jersey went further, saying it will let displaced voters vote by fax or email. Ballot integrity advocates warn that this raised risks of fraud by hackers, or mischief by partisan local officials because electronic ballots lack secrecy and are not safeguarded by witnesses. Across the storm-damaged region on Monday, bleary-eyed, disheveled residents drove long distances and waited in long lines at government offices to cast early ballots, and many said voting felt like an important step back toward normalcy. On Tuesday, the line to vote at an East Village polling station extended half a block down First Avenue and rapidly built westward on 9th Street. By 8:40 a.m. at least 175 people were patiently reading papers, manipulating smartphones and drinking coffee, advancing not even a foot a minute. Alex Schroeder, 23, said she hoped it would be no longer than an hour, because she had to get to her job as a preschool teacher. "I am really excited to vote," she said, "so I don't mind waiting." She said that she really wanted Mr. Obama to win, and that the issues in this election, women's roles, economics, gay rights, the environment, were deeply important to her. In Forest Hills, Queens, Dichter, 63, said she had never seen as busy a polling place in her 10-plus years there as she did Tuesday. Asked what was on her mind this day, she began a tirade against one of the presidential candidates, then stopped and summed up her mindset thusly: "Women's rights. In New York, there are very tight congressional or legislative races in Queens, on Staten Island, on Long Island and in Westchester County, all of which were hit hard by the storm. Candidates in those races went to great lengths to ensure that their supporters could surmount the extraordinary obstacles to voting this year. On Staten Island, the congressional campaign of Mark Murphy, the Democrat running against Representative Michael G. Graham, the Republican, sent volunteers to gasoline lines across the borough with infinies to help idling voters figure out where they should go on Tuesday. Mr. Graham's campaign said it was recruiting volunteers with full gas tanks to transport to the polls voters whose cars were destroyed or had no gas. Many voters already confronted confusion and signs of chaos as they sought to vote Monday, or to figure out where they could vote on Tuesday. "They told me I can register today, but I can't vote in this election," said Helen Colin, 69, a retired woman who journeyed to the Staten Island's Eastern Shore to register her disabled husband to vote, after trying but failing to do so online. At least that's what I think, they said. Local and state officials were plainly having trouble conveying information about election day obstacles and remedies. New Jersey officials could not say how many polling places had been moved, though they said fewer than 100 still needed some resolution. The outdated website for hard-hit Ocean County directed residents of Seaside Heights to that shore town's flooded, unelectrified, empty community center. In New York City, Mayor Michael R. Bloomberg worried aloud that the relocation of polling places could depress turnout, since, he said, motivating people to cast their ballots was a chore even in an ordinary election year. The question is, will they make the effort? He said. Polling places require power to run their electronic machines. As of Monday night, more than 100 polling places in New York State had been changed, including about 60 in the city. Most were in Brooklyn and Queens, in 2 cases, in the Rockaways and the Throgs Neck section of the Bronx. The city was setting up polling places in tents powered by generators and outfitted with portable heaters. The city's Board of Elections also arranged for shuttle buses that would run every 15 minutes to ferry voters to and from polling places in 3 areas hit particularly hard by the storm: the Rockaways, Coney Island and Staten Island. Juan Carlos Polanco, a commissioner on the Board of Elections, said it had done everything in its power to publicize the new locations of polling places. "We want New Yorkers to be patient tomorrow," Mr. Polanco said. "Elections are hard enough to run as it is. But the board has a troubled track record, even when elections are not preceded by hurricanes." In 2010, computer malfunctions and delayed openings of polling places led Mr. Bloomberg to pronounce the board's handling of the election a royal screw-up. In June, the 5-way Democratic primary for Representative Charles B. Rangel's seat took weeks to be counted. Local elected officials were not optimistic about Tuesday. Councilwoman Gail A. Brewer, a Manhattan Democrat, said she had heard from utility workers scheduled to work 12-hour shifts on Election Day who had no idea how they were supposed to vote. And Councilman Jumaane D. Williams, a Brooklyn Democrat, questioned why thousands of voters taking refuge at evacuation shelters would not be able to cast provisional ballots at their shelters. Mr. Williams said, "My guess is that you don't have your house. You have no place to live. You may not have food. This is probably not at the top of your list of things to do." In Ocean County, officials took extra steps to allow displaced residents to vote. They sent the mobile voting bus to shelters there and in adjacent Burlington County. They also sought to address the problem of provisional ballots by printing 50,000 generic ballots and allowing voters to fill in the names of their local candidates. For candidates in tight races, the effort to get voters to the polls was both frantic and delicate. On Long Island, volunteers for Randy Altshuler, the Republican challenging Representative Timothy H. Bishop, a Democrat, called voters to make sure they knew that the election was still taking place and to offer rides. But every conversation began with a question about whether the voters needed help. "It's really a totally different script," said Diana Queer, Mr. Altshuler's campaign manager. Many Barrier Island voters forced from their homes seemed to clutch at the chance to vote as if it were a memento salvaged from the flotsam of their pre-storm lives. Justine Fracchioni, 29, of Lavlet, then J, voted at the county building in Toms River on Monday, she said, because without television, internet or a charged cell phone, she had not been able to find out where to go on Election Day. She was forced to move because her home was severely damaged, and then again when her grandmother's house lost power. But as the daughter of a one-time Jersey City councilman, she said, she was not going to be deterred. "It's your right to vote," she said. "You figure out how to get there, and you just do it."